Here we are again, continue talking about Sahih Bukhari, The End of a Myth by author Rashid Ilal from Morocco. Today, I'm going to go over the part of the book where he gives plenty of evidence about a lot of hadith in that book that really contradicts, and it makes the Prophet ﷺ looks bad. Again, I'll be very brief, but the point here in this chapter is he was tackling is why the hadith is really committing a crime against the reputation of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and contradicting clearly contradicting the Quran, and also given a bad reputation to the Quran by creating confusion about some of the verses that was supposed to be included but is not included, some of the hadith that were found in Sahih al-Bukhari and it's not found in the Quran. So really the why do we need to challenge the hadith? It is because the hadith itself challenges the Quran. And many of you know the fact that many of the Salafi scholars right now, they consider if the hadith is Sahih in Sahih Bukhari, it overrules the Quran. It is not a myth, it's a fact that exists right now. And he gives in this chapter, he gives many evidence and hadith about Aisha radiallahu anha, when she's talking about breastfeeding, 10 if you suck a nipple 10 times, it create a haram relationship between that individual and the person is doing the sucking. And here he talks about it, he goes at length explaining that Aisha said that the Prophet, it changed 10 to 5. Someone breastfeeding used to be 10, then 5, then the Prophet ﷺ died. And here it's not a hadith. Aisha is saying that this is a verse in the Quran that should have been included, and that's in the Sahih Book. So these verses, they don't exist in the Quran about 10 the breastfeeding or any of that nonsense. So it does a disservice to the Quran when you have a hadith of Aisha saying there is a verse in the Quran that talks about sucking 10 times, then it changed to 5 times, then the Prophet ﷺ died. Also, you find in Sahih Muslim, he gives the number of the hadith 726. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari narrated, he said that we used to read verses from the Quran, and we forgot that verse. And that particular verse, he is saying that the sons of Adam, if given wealth, they would want more wealth. Like if you have a valley of this amount of money, you want 2 valleys, and nothing will fill the greed of the sons of Adam except turab. He's saying that this is a verse that they used to memorize, and he forgot that verse. This is a hadith for Abu Musa al-Ash'ari saying that there is something that he used to know, a verse in the Quran that actually does not exist in the Quran. About the wealth and about the greedy people. And also he gives another hadith that the companions, they used to read verses in the Quran and they forgot that verse. But he says the only thing that I still remember from that verse in the Quran is Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu lima taquluna ma la taf'alun. O you who believe, why do you say something that you did not do yourself? Then it will be written around your neck, and Judgment Day you will be asked about it. they're saying that this used to be a verse in the Quran. So again, some of these hadith are saying that there are verses that does not exist in the Quran. We don't have it. There is no verses in the Quran talks about these things. So again, it creates a confusion about whether the Quran is authentic or not, whether there are some verses where the Sahaba used to know they don't exist anymore. So that's why it's very important to basically challenge those things. It's just not true. And he, in this chapter, Dr. Rashid Ilal gives hadith in Sahih Bukhari. The number of the hadith is 5,957, and the sanad is to Ibn Abbas, and everybody knows Ibn Abbas, famous narrator according to Hadith book, famous narrator of Hadith books. And he said that I heard Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam say, basically talking about that the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam talking about that the greed of the sons of Adam, how much they love wealth, and nothing will fulfill their greed but dust. And he is saying that Ibn Abbas is saying that this is supposed to be a verse, and it's in Sahih Bukhari, again challenging the truthfulness of the Quran. People that are reading that hadith and reading the Quran are going to ask themselves, where is this verse that Ibn Abbas is saying? It does not exist in the Quran. So the question arises whether this is the Quran has been omitted or something added or something taken out. So that's why you need to challenge these hadiths, because those hadith, they challenge the authenticity and the truthfulness and the accuracy of the Quran itself. The Quran itself. Also, he gives another hadith in Sahih Bukhari about Ibn Abbas, and he said that when Umar ibn al-Khattab came back from last Hajj, saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in truth, and then revealed the book to the Prophet Muhammad, and what and in that book Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the ayatul rajm, a verse about stoning someone, and Umar is saying in the hadith in Sahih Bukhari that we used to read that verse about stoning people, and we understood it and comprehended it. That's why the Prophet used to practice stoning, and we followed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by stoning people. And Umar is continuing saying, I am worried about if time passes by, people might say, where is this stoning verses in the Quran? In the Quran. So it's a kind of strange hadith. Umar is saying that there is a verse in the Quran that was revealed and they used to memorize it, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam carried the act of stoning. But we all know there is nothing in the Quran about stoning. So the question is when someone reads that hadith, something is gonna come to mind. Oh, it's not in the Quran. Maybe somebody decided to take it out. So it creates that confusion about the completion and the truthfulness, the entire text of the Quran. So that's why when you read this hadith in Sahih Bukhari, you have to say, no, this is just not true. The Quran is authentic, the Quran is truthful, and something about these hadith are fabricated. They are not true at all. So that thing about stoning is not true. Also, in the book he gives the Hadith in Bukhari number 3477, that a companion of the Prophet said that we went to Bilad al-Sham, Damascus and Syria in the present time, and we used to recite the verse from the Quran, that if you compare it, that it has a word in it, وَمَا خَلَقَ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنثَى. So it does not exist in the Quran. So the verse is adding something to a verse a companion of the Prophet used to narrate that is not actually the actual accurate existing verse in the Quran. So again, it brings a question to mind: why the contradiction? Why is this verse that is narrated by a companion contradicts the one in the Quran? And also in this chapter, Rashid Ilal talks about in Muslim, Sahih Muslim, that Aisha mentioned something, a verse in the Quran that says protect prayers and the middle prayer and the prayer of Asr. And she said that I've heard this from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Aisha is saying that she heard a verse from the Quran that says protect the Salah and Salatul Asr. But that's not true. We all know that there is no verse in the Quran that states that. Again, when Aisha is saying something like that, it's going to create the confusion of who is right here. Is it the book of Hadith is right? Why the word Asr, the prayer Asr, does not exist in the present Quran? So somebody took it out, or so either you believe the Quran is to be authentic right now. Again, it's creating this confusion whether the Quran accurate or not. That's why we need to keep studying those hadith and not blindly believe everything that they have in it. And also in this book, in this chapter, a story about Fath al-Bari fi Sharh al-Bukhari, about a book called Fath al-Bari. Aisha also said, Sami'a Rasulullah rajulan, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he heard a man reading something from the Quran. And the Prophet said to Aisha, this man reading the Quran reminded me about verses in the Quran that I forgot from. And that's exactly the quote in the book of Sahih Bukhari. And the Prophet saying, from Surah this and this. So he didn't mention the surah, he didn't mention the ayah, the verse. He said this and this, kada wa kada. The Prophet would not, first of all, the Prophet would not forget a verse from the Quran. And if he's quoting the verses that he forgot, he would mention that which verse. He would mention which ayah. He would mention which surah. So again, in Bukhari, they attribute things to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that makes the Prophet looks bad. So when we are challenging the books of Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, and all these tradition books, is to defend the honor and the kindness and the mercy and the intelligence and the pure service that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, and to defend the Quran from being corrupted by stories that contradict the Quran. So here another hadith is mentioned that is also in Sahih Bukhari about an animal like a lizard that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded to kill that lizard. The Prophet would not command to kill a lizard, and the explanation is this lizard participated in blowing fires when Ibrahim was being burned, put into the middle of the fire. So it's hard to believe that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say such a thing, but it is in Bukhari. And let alone the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying that what causes something for you to be aware of and cursed and brings bad luck. And one of those things that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Hadith is saying that the women bring bad luck, and a horse and an empty house. It's just hard to believe that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say such a thing. Also, he gives another hadith. He gives a lot of hadith in this, but I've selected few. And also, there is a hadith in Bukhari that says that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kataba, written to all humans their part in zina, the committing adultery. So it's saying that it is something that is written that somewhere, sometime, something, a human being will commit zina. So it's kind of hard to believe that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would utter such an awful thing, that it's predestined for an individual to do such a thing. Also in Sahih Bukhari, there is a strange hadith that the Prophet ﷺ visited one of his companion wife in her house. When his companion is not there, he slept there, and she went through his hair. And it just really, I mean, there are some things, I honestly tell you, there are some verses in the Quran with sexual content that I am ashamed even to talk about, that accuses the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in awful things that I wouldn't even dare to repeat what is the quote in Sahih Bukhari about sexual acts or about sexual things, or just nonsense. It's awful and it's bad. We need to defend the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from such accusation. Also in Sahih Bukhari, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, talking about a mouse, or far in Arabic, a mouse, rat, and he's saying, Sahih Bukhari is saying that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that this is one of the lost. These are the Jews, basically, Bani Israel, not the Jews, Bani Israel, the tribe of Israel. And hadith was narrated, Abu Huraira narrated the hadith. Bani Israel lost a nation amongst them. We don't know what happened to her. We think it became the rat or a mice. So that is, again, it's hard to believe. It doesn't make any sense. Contradicts the Quran big time. The Prophet ﷺ needs to be defended. He will not say such a thing. Another hadith about monkeys throwing stones, stoning another monkey for committing adultery. And another hadith that he gives about the Prophet ﷺ asking another companion, do you know where the sun goes when it sets? At the time of the sunset, where does it go? And also doesn't make, you read in this hadith, does not make any scientific sense, but it's there. And also it talks about hadith. Dr. Ilal goes about sexual hadith related to sexual behavior. It just does not make any sense. This chapter was really long in talking, listing. There's so many hadith that the author think it does not make any sense. But none stranger than the hadith that you find in Sahih Bukhari that about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam many times trying to commit suicide. And that is just pathetic and hard to comprehend that someone like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was sent mercy to mankind, would give up and would contemplate committing suicide. And also there is hadith in Bukhari number 4693 accuses the companion of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam by neglecting to bury the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam for 3 days until just 3 days until the corpses start swollen up and stuff like that. It's just hard to believe. That is so untrue. We need to keep understanding the books of hadith, because the books of hadith are making the Quran look bad, are making the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam look bad, and creating laws that are not Islamic laws but traditional laws. Please don't forget to share this with people that non-Arabic speaker, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much, and Assalamu alaikum.